Welcome, brother, to another episode of Around the Fire. Ryan Schwartz here with Eric Aumann. And as always, it is a pleasure to welcome you and host you in this space. And on today's episode, we will be diving into the topic of relationship. And as we were briefly trading ideas right around what this episode might include and how to make this of the highest service, one thing just kept showing up in my body and my awareness, which is what a sadness, right? And what a crime to never experience your intimate partner, your wife, as she truly is, beyond your misconceptions, projections, judgments, and ultimate distortions. What a sadness it would be to go decades, perhaps an entire lifetime, without ever truly seeing and knowing her as she is, beyond that cloudedness. And what a relief it would be to start moving into a place of experiencing her as she is, lucidly, beyond those distortions and misperceptions. And with that intention, it is our goal here to free you both from that crime against one another and to revel in the experience of what is true. And with that, I am in, and I pass the microphone to Eric to open the space.
Thanks, Ryan. So, men, if you're not already, get to a place where you will be free of distraction for the next half an hour or so. And as you find yourself in this distraction-free place, go ahead and close your eyes. We want to first bring your awareness to the base of your spine, to your root. And I invite you to allow your root to extend down into the earth, into the rock, into the dirt, grounding you deeply down to the earth so we can have this conversation around the fire here and now. And then bring your awareness up to the base of your spine and gradually raising your awareness through each vertebrae, allowing your vertebrae to be stacked strong, one on top of the one below it. Working your way up, all the way up through your back, up to the base of your skull. And as your spine is balanced and strong, allow the tension you may have been holding in the front of your body to relax. Relaxing your genitals, relaxing your belly, relaxing your chest, relaxing your shoulders, relaxing your neck, and just allowing yourself to be fully here in this moment. And now bringing your awareness to your breath as you bring your breath down into your belly, allowing your belly to expand on the inhale, and on the exhale, allowing it to move back toward the spine. And as you become more present in your body, I invite you to envision yourself around a fire with Ryan, myself, and the other men who are showing up to participate and listen in on this podcast. And as you take your place around the fire and you begin to gaze into the fire, with each exhale, you release more and more of what is distracting you, what is keeping you from being even more present in your body. And so as you breathe into your belly and your belly expands, you become more present for this conversation around the fire. And as you exhale, you release distraction. And from the beginning, we set a strong intention that a energetic boundary be extended around our sacred space, and the 4 sacred centuries holding the security of this container be placed at the north, south, east, and west, keeping out anything and everything not in alignment with the highest and best good of Ryan, myself, and each man who participates with in the playback of this podcast. We also ask that it be secured in the recording process and in the storage and hosting process, keeping out anything and everything that does not serve the highest and best good of the individuals listening or the individuals recording. At this time, we would take a moment to honor the ancestors who have gone before us, whose shoulders we stand upon, as well as the descendants who will continue on after we're gone. We honor the wisdom keepers and the lineage holders of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We honor the directions of the north, south, east, and west, Father Sky above, Mother Earth below, and we honor the divine spark within and without. Lastly, we honor our individual masters, teachers, and guides, and all those who support each of us in manifesting the dream we saw for ourselves before we were born. Taking a few more deep breaths into your body, reconnecting with the grounding strength of the earth beneath you. When you're feeling grounded and centered in your body, you can open your eyes as we prepare to begin.
Thank you, Eric. As we were settling in, I was reminded of something I contemplated not too long ago in examining my own relationship and relationships prior. And it was that a relationship doesn't meet premature end necessarily by something that was done, said, or seen, but what was unsaid, unseen, and unmet. It's the silent omissions. It is the sin of missing. To sin means to miss, to err in your observation, to limit what can be seen, observed, and skillfully responded to. And yet, our relationship is perhaps, for as much time as we spend immersed in that container, probably more so than any other container in our lives as adults, we are still so prone to miss. And there's a cruel hilarity within that. And I wanted to bring light to that right around why is it we are so prone to missing the truthfulness of it, not seeing what is so right before our eyes and being so non-observant to what is ultimately true.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Ryan. And it feels like one of the most powerful gifts that we can receive if we're open to it in relationship is this gift of illuminating what's true and not true if we're open to seeing that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that in an intimate relationship, often we've had 15, 20, 30, many years of developing our tools and lenses in which we relate to reality through. And those are based on our past experiences that we've had. They're based on the beliefs we've formed about ourselves and the situations. So a lot of stuff was formed, ages 0 through 7. So many deep grooves in our psyche. And those grooves could be a belief about ourselves, a belief about the world. And many of us spend the rest of our years between age 7 and intimate relationship age, whether you're, early 20s, or, you're in your second or third intimate relationship later on, or well beyond, we spend those years confirming our initial beliefs, right? It's like anything that happens close to that rut just gets swallowed right into it. And it only creates a deeper rut, and a belief about anything that happens anywhere close to here means this. Mm-hmm. And so a truth that could happen over here next to the rut, we just nudge right into that rut so that it's easier for us to make sense of the world.
Right. So when we lay all that out there, right, it almost feels miraculous that a relationship can survive when we are in fact not relating with one another, but through our misguided lenses and our perceptions that have been informed by events and ideas and beliefs that occurred largely pre-verbally, right, and have only been solidified, cemented, and gathered momentum since. So with that said, right, if you could shed light, right, of what this looks like candidly within a relationship sphere, right, and what is the stance and the shared stance and shared compassion that gives us a fighting chance, right, to not just be in this state of disrepair and temporary repair before repeating that cycle, but one of true, authentic relating? And I know that's a big question, especially one to answer, in this kind of form. But I'd love your take on that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful question. And it's one I think a lot of men, maybe even you listening to this right now, have asked yourself. And what it can look like for a lot of men, and what it can honestly even look like in my life still, is two different partners, two different sets of past experiences. In an idealistic world, we're both in a state of neutrality, where we can benevolently experience the present moment as it is. And most of the time, for most couples, that's a challenging place to maintain. It's a challenging place to be in. So what that means is that two people are showing up to the same situation and they're experiencing two separate realities. And so communication can become very tricky and challenging. Expressing desires, expressing needs, expressing boundaries in relation to a situation where the situation is the same, but the realities that are perceived on both partners' sides are different, creates challenges in communicating, because there often is a lack of acknowledgement that there are two different realities, and a lack of acknowledgement that those realities are being experienced through the lens of their past experiences. And so in that situation, if we are to have a fighting chance, we have to individually do whatever level of work we are prepared to do. And we'll offer some beginning steps toward the end of this podcast. But beginning work looks like starting to acknowledge how we created the lenses we experience reality through. What was their origin? How do we create them? And how do we habitually choose to see life through those lenses? And in relationship, where are we changing the situation to confirm the beliefs we have about intimacy, about our partner, and about ourselves? So a practical situation. I think it could be good to have an example. Mm-hmm. Let's say Fred has a belief that he's not trustable, that he just can't be trusted. And he formed that belief when he was young, and his mom always told him that he was a liar, that he was lying, and he can't be trusted. So he took on, as a way to relate to the world and himself, that he was untrustable. And so his need that wasn't met as a kid was being trusted, being trustworthy, being depended on, being trusted. And so in relationship, Fred is in relationship with Susie. And when Susie asks any question that Fred could potentially misconstrue into not being trusted, Fred automatically takes that innocent question that Susie asks and says, "You never trust me. Have I ever lied to you?" And he blows up.
Right.
Because his experience is that that's what happens in intimate relationship. That's how trust plays into love with Fred. And so he's looking to confirm that any chance he gets, because in some part of his psyche, understanding reality, even if it's false, is more important than experiencing the truth.
Right. What lands there is that this obvious place of handicap that we participate in relationship from fails to get acknowledged, right? Because it doesn't make for great courtship, right? It certainly doesn't make for great attraction, right? If you showed up on that third date, right, and said, we are inevitably going to fuck with each other's wounds, trigger each other's traumas, and see each other maybe for a fraction of who we truly are. You want to come back home with me, right? It's not going to click. And we bypass that necessary establishment of what we are bringing to that table, right? And then when it inevitably arises, we don't necessarily grant ourselves or our partners the compassion that would require, or the patience and space that requires. We see that as a detrimental, fatal flaw, right? Versus a reality of relating and a reality of growing into authentic relating. And short of giving each other that chance to be imperfect in the pursuit of greater clarity and greater sight and greater authenticity, there's not a lot of room to err, right? And I think that's where we get tripped up, right? Expecting a degree of perfection and cleanliness from ourselves and from our partner. I'll give you one example from my own life, right? Where I'll experience any trigger, right? You know, maybe, well, let's use the classic, right? The dishes piling up in the sink. Something so mundane that in truth, in honesty, simply means, right, that it was a busy day and no one's had a chance to get around to it yet, right? Probably something as dumb and simple as that. Yet there's the part of me that will be in full out reactivity, right? Saying there is neglect here. A boundary has been crossed. I have not been listened to. She is not willing to help me or make my life easier, right? She is leaving this on me. She's putting all the weight and responsibility on me. How fucking dare she, right? And that will be activated within. And as a man who takes a degree of pride in doing the work, right? Examining the shadow, being on the path, you know, however you want to frame it, there's almost no willingness to see myself in that experience, right? And see, okay, I am in less than integrity in this perception, and I still have the capacity to operate out of falsehood, right? And see falsehood. And that is a bitter pill to swallow a year onto the path, let alone 10, let alone 20, right? So that examination, or that willingness to examine, I wouldn't say is completely absent, but is difficult than many other contexts.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that is that unwillingness to examine is going back to it's more comfortable to be right, quote unquote, than it is to get to the bottom or to the truth of the situation. Because one of the gifts of relationship is that we mirror back to each other naturally. The trauma, the areas we fall short, the parts that aren't in alignment with our fullest potential, we illuminate those to each other. And especially, feminine partners, they have quite the ability to showcase what is less than the expectation, what is less than the standard. And that's true for the feminine within us too. It's like the raging river pounds away and erodes the loose sediment along the riverbank and lets the stone behind, right? Well, in a situation where we are getting triggered, what that's bringing up for us isn't about that moment. It's about something that we haven't discovered yet fully. We haven't discovered the depth of the origin of that trigger yet. And often the origin of that trigger is the same origin that helped create a core belief of some kind, or a deeply held belief. And what we do, how we operate, is we take those core beliefs and we create judgments. It's almost like a guess about how reality is about to unfold. And the scary thing about judgments, the thing that is really detrimental, and we all do this, is it creates a real energetic limitation, not only in what we're able to perceive, because it's like we're putting on glasses and we're seeing reality and we're saying, I'm only willing to see what comes through this exact lens that I created, because this is what reality looks like. So anything that falls outside of that, even if it's the truth, I'm unwilling to see. And in relationship, when we put those glasses on, that's when we get triggered and we misperceive things that aren't actually happening the way we think they're happening. And that's the root of a lot of the conversations where people aren't able to hear each other, because we're both talking about the same situation perceived through two sets of lenses.
Right. I want to take a second and talk about truth being on a spectrum, right? Not black or white thinking, but perhaps even containing some fragment or some morsel of accuracy in that judgment that, of course, inflames all the way to the fullness of that negative distortion, right? So let's take the sink example, for example, right? If you had been in dialogue with your partner, right, and said it would be meaningful to me and supportive, I would experience a tremendous amount of support if you could commit to keeping this clean, right? Then there is some truthfulness, right, in saying that a request has been neglected, right? Whether or not that request was rooted in a true need or, once again, some form of a distortion or a trauma response is almost irregardless, right? A request was made and neglected. And there's enough truthfulness in the idea that my request was neglected and not met, right? So there is enough reality to latch onto the full misconception and carry it into that 10 on 10. And I think what's important is that we don't gaslight ourselves into pretending that there is no quote unquote negative element to our relationship that needs to be examined or even asked for clarity, right? A rejection, right? A partner who is not available and unwilling to be intimate, for example, in either direction, could be totally separate from one's feeling that they are weaponizing their love, right? Or unavailable. And where bitterness has stewed, perhaps part of it is being weaponized, right? And cut off and withdrawn. And it's important to recognize that in nearly all cases, yes, we have exaggerated the meaning and added meaning based on those judgments and misconceptions and those projections. And if we cut off the piece that may have some basis in reality and at least not question it in healthy dialogue with our partner, hey, is it possible, right, that when this happens, it's indicative of this, right? Not as an accusation, but as a point of conversation and healthy dialogue. Then we also lose part of that richness, right? And part of the revelation that could lead to transformation.
Yeah, I think that part of what we can do, moving into a more remedial space here, is judgments often thrive in rigidity, right? Where it's like nothing else could be true outside of this. And when we start to soften up and just ask questions of ourselves and our partners, we can start to become curious about the situation.
Right.
When we become seekers of the truth in our relationship, not the truth that's black and white, because the truth is we are two complex individuals with a complex history coming together in a moment with infinite variables. And so it's more about finding the truth between the two of you than it is finding a truth where one person's right and the other's wrong. It's a mutual discovery and a collaborative discovery. And there are all sorts of techniques and ways to get to that. But I'm curious, Ryan, if you have anything to offer that would help people get started, because that's people spend years in couples therapy or years doing the couples work to get to the depths of this, and that's not necessary to get started, right?
Right. I love that you called it the seeking of truth within the relationship. There's a sense of togetherness in that, and collaboration and partnership. If you can both acknowledge what is true, right, that we are operating from some degree, some indefinite, non-knowable degree of judgment, of misguided perception, of falsehood, and my commitment to you as your partner is to endeavor towards the fullness grasp of truthfulness available to us, right? And asking for the same or requesting or inviting the same, I think that is a beautiful starting point, right? And maybe even part of this remedial action of humbly acknowledging that much of what is operational on the surface is based on mistruth, and simply getting on the same team, right? And saying, holy shit, we are up against this pile, these thick layers of known and unknown stuff that is informing our belief systems and our judgment systems. And I love you. And my commitment to you is to rise above all of that and see you as you truly are and have you experience me in my fullness. Does that sound good? Is that something you're game for, right?
Yeah.
I think that is a tremendous starting point that gives one another, the safety they need to pursue that work, right? It's the acknowledgement that, yeah, you're not going to be perfect in this. I'm not going to be perfect in this, because how can we be, right? We are humans carrying baggage, and endeavoring towards collaborating in that pursuit towards wholeness and truthfulness, I think, is a beautiful first step, and a conversation that one can have with their partner if that level of dialogue is available for you in this moment. Beyond that, a solo practice that can liberate your own perceptions beyond the thick sediment of judgment and negative core beliefs is simply to chronicle and journal out, stream of consciousness, 2 to 3 pages of a typical day with your partner, right? What she's doing, how you're reacting, what is a common exchange between you, how that's experienced in your body, what you feel that means, what you believe that means, right? So that might be, Susie didn't empty the dishes again, and I felt like, oh my God, she's never going to respect me, right? She's never going to take what I'm saying seriously. I'm never going to be acknowledged for a man. I have to leave. I have to do this. I have to get out of here and find someone who's going to totally honor me for who I am, and just goes on and on and on, right? Write all that out unfiltered, right? Because there is no filter in the subconscious, right?
Yeah.
And you can only repress and suppress so much of that bridging into the words you speak and share and the damage they may create, right? And the harm they may create. So relinquish that to the safety of the page, right? And the privacy within that experience. And when you feel complete, simply take a highlighter, right? Read through them out loud. And whenever something is spoken about in an absolute, a black and white statement of this means this is what she's doing, this is what she thinks of me, assumptions, judgments, projections, anything of that nature, highlight it. And you might end up with 10, 20, 50 statements, right? Or ideas or perceptions. And go through them one by one, right? Read it out loud and ask yourself, is this absolutely true, right? Is this absolutely true? And sit with that. Let that question crack and penetrate the seeming solidity of what you believe to be true. Because belief leaves no room for grayness or fuzziness, right? It is hardened. It is binary. It is certain or not at all. And there's little in between. And if you could even just soften the rigidity, as Eric was mentioning, around each of those things, and if all you got to is maybe there's an element of this is true. Maybe she is still angry at me about something 3 years ago and is punishing me through this as a microaggression, but I'm not sure, right? You've made progress, right? And you have something to dialogue with in a healthy way. But it's not until you loosen that rigidity on the 10 on 10 absolute certain for all those judgments, all those perceptions, that you can even give yourself the space to examine that, let alone examine it safely and productively with your partner.
Yeah, so beautiful. And just to reiterate how powerful that practice is, like I've had some of my biggest breakthroughs through stream of consciousness journaling and then reading it back. And so really encourage you to, like Ryan said, unfilter it by just letting it fly, letting it be messy, letting it be even nonsense at points if that's what's coming through, rather than make it nice and neat. Because this isn't an essay anybody else is reading. This is unfiltered treasure territory for you to go back and mine and find the gems within it.
Yeah, it's the cloaked foe that we have to fear most, right? The one that we don't allow voice because of the embarrassment or shame of having that being operational, right? As a man who has likely done a lot of work, if you are listening to this, if you have found resonance with our material and landed here, there's a very high likelihood that you are high functioning and high performing and view and experience yourself as such, right? As someone who has taken pride in doing a lot of work on himself, a lot of personal growth, personal development, spiritual work. And one of the detriments, so to speak, of having progressed down that path is sometimes it's just so hard to look at those less matured 4-year-old you who is in folded arm refusal to see anything but that assumption of being rejected, right? Yet, until or unless we do, we're going to suffer for it, right? And harm will be perpetuated, right, in our relationship, with what our children observe of us, in our stance, in our reactivity. And it is work well worth doing. So yes to that stream of consciousness, yes to letting it rip, letting it fly, totally unfiltered. And yes to repeating this as often as is necessary, because different days will evoke different shit, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And ultimately endeavor to reach a place in your relationship where those fuzzy statements, right, the ones that may have some basis of truth and reality, whether that is in one-on-one dialogue between you and your partner, if there is the safety and capacity to do that, and that is a big if that one must be honest for, because you can come at it with the highest and purest of intent, and sometimes that space is just not there yet. So whether it's one-on-one or whether in the presence of a counselor, a therapist, or a trusted guide, partner with your partner in examining those assumptions, right? I feel and experience that when X happens, that there might still be unforgiven hurts and unforgiven betrayals that are driving that behavior or action. Can you please shed some light on what you are experiencing or feeling when that happens, right? So non-accusatory, non-violent, owning your experience, and ultimately making way for the most positive, productive dialogue possible. But it is work, and it does yield the rewards quite frequently and quite immediately when you share in those breakthroughs together. So it is my intention and my hope that you have received what is necessary out of this dialogue, out of this transmission, out of this practice. And of course, we are available to continue this dialogue with you. If you are listening, it is because you have been in contact with myself or Eric or another member of the council. You have access to tools, you have access to us, and there is no reason to allow these patterns to perpetuate and continue to ripple out in harmful ways. So that invitation remains there, and I will pass it over to Eric for final thoughts and closing.
I think you said it really well, Ryan. The support is there. There's no reason to continue to act out the same drama based on the same old beliefs. There is support available, and there are some really powerful practices that we shared right in this podcast. So if you're feeling complete, Ryan, I'm going to wrap it up.
Yeah, please do.
Cool. So men, come back to a place of stillness, a place within your body, supported by your strong spine, and breathe down into your belly. Reconnect with your strong anchoring to the earth. Reconnect with your core. And with each exhale, just allow yourself to release all that no longer serves you, whether it be part of this transmission or part of what you are letting go of. With each inhale, just draw in that which is right and perfect for you to integrate into your core. And allow it to incubate, ripen, and to unfold in right and perfect timing in your life. As we prepare to close down our space, we want to honor once again our masters, teachers, guides, and all those who support each of us in the manifestation of the dream we saw for ourselves before we were born. We dedicate this podcast episode to the upliftment of suffering and confusion for all sentient beings and the amplification of love energy on earth. And at this time, we seal it all up, sealing, guarding, protecting. It is sealed. It is finished. It is done. When you're feeling grounded and centered in your body and anchored to the earth, you can open your eyes, and we are complete.